Hello everyone, welcome back to Security Architect Playbook. I'm Sabah. So today we are talking about network segmentation architecture, not firewalls, not security groups, not any vendor diagrams with clouds and the shields. No, we're talking about how security architects actually assess segmentation, right? So how we stop lateral movement, how we control blast radius, because identity gets attackers in, network let them move, right? So this is what this episode is all about. So here's the flow. First, we look at the overall architecture, just an example architecture for you to understand like what we are talking about. Then segmentation layers, ingress boundaries, your east to west controls, egress strategy. Then we'll talk about DNS and your service routing a bit, inspection points, your telemetry. Finally, I'll give you a practical assessment checklist as usual and some common failures what we see everywhere. Same pattern as all the previous episodes, architecture first and tools last, right? Happy to jump in. Let's start with the bigger picture, right? So if you see here, this is a hybrid environment, on-prem plus cloud, right? So what we have here, if you see, internet ingress, on-prem data center, your cloud environment, hub and spoke networking, you have your central inspection, segmented workload zones, even you have your unified telemetry. So security architects don't care about individual subnets first. What we care about, where are the trust boundaries, right? And then where does traffic actually gets inspected? Where can attackers move freely, right? So this diagram already tells me more than most document I get. Good. Okay, so moving on, the segmentation layers. This is core, right? So segmentation is not just network to network. So what we are supposed to segment is even user to application, application to application, your application to database, the management plane, your shared services. Each layer is its own trust boundary, right? So that's the plan here. That's the idea. So a security architect mindset, I'm sorry. Yeah. So a security architect mindset here, if this layer is compromised, what's reachable next, right? So that's how we have to think here. So flat networks fails instantly, as we all know. So layered segmentation usually help slowing down the attacker. We cannot say like it can 100% provide protect us, right? So it can slow down the attackers. Now, okay, ingress boundaries. So this is how the traffic enters. So internet facing entry points, your private application access, WAF, identity aware routing, DDoS protection. So with all this, right? So ingress boundaries. Security architects want very few ingress points actually. Everything funnels through control gateways. So question what I usually ask is, are the applications directly exposed? Is identity evaluated at the ingress, right? And is WAF actually enforcing rules? I do have a different video about the security control WAF and how it can be used and cannot be used. So you can refer that as well. And then we'll also ask like, are private apps really private, right? So ingress is your first choke point. So treat it very seriously. Then comes your east-west traffic control. So this is where most environment actually collapse. So east-west means your internal traffic, just to be very clear, right? So the traffic between your workloads, between your services, or even between your different tiers, what you have. So what we do is we use micro segmentations, workload firewalls, and we can also use your service identity explicit allow path, right? It's not like allow everything if it is east to west traffic. So we have to like explicit in allowing all those paths. And then zero implicit trust. We need to make sure about that as well. So again, as an architect, what we do is, can any workload talk to any other workload. We need to check this. We need to list down and see whether it is really required. If yes, how is it protected? If the answer for this is yes, segmentation does not exist, right? So attackers usually love the east-west freedom. Now comes your egress strategy. Usually, nobody thinks about egress until data is gone. So outbound traffic must be controlled. It can be through your proxy-based inspection, your DNS filtering, allow listed destinations only, your exfiltration prevention. So again, as a security architect, what we have to think is, why can this server talk to the entire internet? Is there a real reason? If yes, it's not protected, right? So production workloads should have very limited outbound access, as we all know. So open egress equal to invisible breaches. So that's how I see this. And yeah, so this layer, the DNS and service routing, quietly breaks security, right? So because DNS is not plumbing, it's a control, right? So we assess internal DNS segmentation, your private endpoints, service mesh routing if you have one, the name resolution boundaries, traffic steering. Imagine if your DNS is flat, means segmentation is fake. So attackers use DNS to discover everything. Security architects like me usually treat DNS as part of security fabric, right? And okay, this is where the actual enforcement happens. You can use your network firewalls, application gateways, your service mesh policies, host based controls, your packet inspection zones, right? All this. So the important concept here is not everything goes through one firewall. So the modern architecture needs inspection at multiple layers, right? So that's what we are referring to. That's the inspection points what we are talking about. So we design inspection based on traffic type. So for example, if your traffic type is northwest or east-west or egress, right? So based on this, the inspection need to be added. So coverage usually matters more than the number of products what you use. So when you design your architecture, you need to keep this in your mind. And then, okay, my favorite. So this piece decides whether segmentation is real or it's imaginary, right? So what we collect, we usually collect flow logs, your complete firewall logs, your DNS telemetry, east-west traffic visibility as we discussed, your policy decision logs. All this need to be collected in a centralized solution. It can be your SIM. So if you can't see these flows, practically segmentation doesn't exist, right? So security architects usually ask, can I trace a packet from a user to a database? If not, good luck, you're dealing with an incident. Now, okay, this is my real world process. During an assessment, we'll start with mapping all the trust zones, then trace the traffic path, right? Then identify your implicit trust, validate the segmentation and the enforcement, review your inspection coverage as we discussed, which all layer you have different type of inspections. Then assess your visibility gaps, as we spoke about the telemetry and logs, what we collect, what we see, right? So we need to assess those gaps as well. Always think like an attacker moving sideways, not like a auditor checking all the boxes, right? So that's a difference between an auditor and a security architect, of course. And as usual, here's your practical checklist, not an explicit one, sorry, not an exhaustive one, but a baseline kind of. So first thing, to have clear trust boundaries and not to have flat networks, east-west controls enforced, egress locked down, the DNS segmented, inspection at every choke points, then your telemetry, the coverage, and also being centralized, right? So imagine if even one or two of these are missing, your architecture actually leaks. Okay, now the reality. What I usually find in different organizations, different enterprise architectures are flat VPCs or VNets. Security group pretending to be segmentation. Sometimes people say, yes, I have different security groups configured, and that's not segmentation, right? No east-west visibility. We trust all the east-west traffic by default. That's a pain. That's a gap, right? So, and wide open egress. Many of you would have seen that. Then, as I already mentioned, DNS treated like plumbing, and your firewall bypasses path. So these are some of the architectural failures, not just operational mistakes, right? So yeah, let's close. Segmentation defines your blast radius. Identity alone is not sufficient, right? Because the identity alone, if you have that, that's obviously insufficient, right? And east-west traffic is the real risk, and we need to understand it and keep it in mind while designing any architecture. And egress is usually ignored by many enterprise, and let's not do that. Visibility makes the segmentation real. So what do you see? Whether you're able to see from where to where the data goes, who accessed it, why was it done, and all these things, right? And yeah, this is the security architect mindset, because we don't design for happy path, we design for compromise. If it is compromised, how much the impact can be, right? So that's the true job of a security architect. So I hope you like this, and see you in the next video.